Welcome back. Our next project is going to be fall berries, and the type of berries we're going to paint are called pyracantha.
So I'm mixing up the colors for the fall berries. I'm starting off with my Pyrrole Orange by Daniel Smith. You could also use Winsor Orange if you're using Winsor Newton paint. Then I'm getting some Scarlet Lake, and I'm just mixing that up on my palette, as I want to have lighter and darker colors. So I'm making the puddle of orange and then just pure Scarlet Lake, and then now I'm adding New Gamboge to the other puddle of Scarlet Lake, which will give me an orangey red color. On to the green for the stem and leaves, I'm using Sap Green. Then I'm mixing up another puddle and then another to make 3, and I just kind of use the strong paint color and then make 2 lighter puddles. To the strongest puddle I'm adding Ultramarine to make a darker bluey green. And then I'm going to add some Winsor Lemon to the lightest puddle to make a really fresh yellow-green color. And then I will just leave the other puddle with Sap Green. Now I'm starting right onto my watercolor paper with my HB mechanical pencil, and I'm just lightly doing a stick drawing onto the paper. So I'm just lightly placing a faint circle where I'm going to put each berry, and then I'm just doing a single line for the main stem as well as some of the smaller stems, just so I have it mapped out and I can lighten it up with my kneaded eraser before I start painting on it, but this will give me a little bit of a guide.
Now that we have our colors mixed up for the pyracantha, we are going to start in on painting it, and we're going to start with painting the berries.
Now I'm just picking up the excess graphite from my stick drawing with my kneaded eraser to get it all prepped, ready to paint. Now I'm starting off with the berries, and I'm using my small number 1 brush, and I'm just grabbing different concentrations of orange and painting each berry in each cluster a slightly different tone of the orange and red tones that I have. So some will be lighter, some will be quite faint, and some will be the darker Scarlet Lake. And so I'm using wet on dry for this portion of the project. And so you just want to make sure your paint is wet enough that it'll move nicely across the paper, but not like a giant puddle of water. You want it more like a milky consistency. And you also just want to leave a little area of highlight for each berry. And I'm just doing that by leaving a white space. I'm not worrying about blending any edges. So you'll just have a white space for each highlight on the berries. And as you can see, I've made some of these ones in this cluster darker, and then I've rinsed out my brush and used the lighter concentration of the orange for the light berries as well. And I like doing this in all of my paintings just because it creates more depth and form and more interest in the look of your painting. Now I am switching to my green paint, and I'm going to start mapping in the stem, again using my smaller size 1 brush. And I'm starting off with making the main stem. And I'm just following my stick drawing. You can't see it as well on film because it's fairly light, but you can either look at the layout drawing you did before if you wanted to make a layout drawing. If you're doing your own painting, in this case you could just look at my example painting for this project and just follow the way the stems attach. This does not have to be perfect. I've just kind of brought the main stem down from one of the middle cluster berries, and then the 2 side clusters I've attached with another berry. And then once I've done that, I will then attach the rest of the berries to the other part of the cluster there. And now you can see at this angle, I'm now doing the smallest stems to attach all the berries to the main base of the cluster. And again, I'm using my smallest brush with very light pressure and the tip held quite upright. And I'm making sure that I don't make stick straight lines for all of these little stems as well. I want some of them to curve, some of them to go in different directions, so it looks more natural. And you can just kind of skip over a berry if the stem is behind it. And again, just dab your brush off each time you pick up new paint. You can also use the scrap piece of paper if you'd like to create a few lines before you go into the painting so that you get that excess paint off. And that'll allow you to create a really nice thin line. Now I'm starting on the leaves. I've switched back to my number 6 brush, and I've just made a tiny little light stroke off the main stem, and then I push my brush down and create a little bit of a round leaf. These leaves are kind of an oval shape with a rounded point on the top. So you're just making a little oval with basically tapers down slightly when it meets the stem. And again, I've rinsed my brush out and made sure that I've used some lighter concentration of paint for some of these leaves to create that depth and interest. Now I'm going to add some further detail and darker color to our fall berries. And I'm going to start off with my smaller brush again when the darkest green. And I'm going to darken areas of the stem where stems meet together, or where a stem meets the main stem or a leaf, or right underneath where a little stem would connect with a berry. And this will just give more depth and form to your painting. So I don't necessarily paint this like I would see in the picture. This is just sort of like one of the steps that I go through with these sorts of paintings is to darken these areas. So this would mean that my paintings are a little bit more stylistic rather than realistic, but I think it's a lovely way to paint, and you still can tell what species of plant it is by doing this. And if you would like, after you add these darker areas, you can rinse your brush out and blend a little bit so that there's not a hard edge, but sometimes the hard edge and the drama of the darker color really does work well. So again, I'm just making sure that I have my brush nice and upright, and I'm working slowly and carefully so that I just paint over the stem. And then I've switched back to my larger number 6 brush now with the darker green. And for this, I just decided that I would make one side of each leaf a little bit darker. So this side would be the bottom, just because that would probably be where the shadow is. And again, this is more of a stylistic choice, but I think it works quite well for this painting. And when I'm working on the lighter leaves, I've just rinsed my brush out again, so even though it is a darker green, it's a lighter version of the darker green compared to the 2 bottom leaves. And I'm just drawing a line down the center, and then just using the tip of my brush to guide it out to the edge. Now I am working on adding a bit more detail to the berries. I'm using my smallest brush again, and I'm using the different colors of orange that I mixed up. I just added a little bit more water and paint to the same puddles of color. And I'm just going along on the bottom of each berry and adding a little bit darker color. So on the lighter berries, I may be adding just the orange, and then on the darkest berries, I'm adding the pure Scarlet Lake. And so you just go along, and I'm just using the bottom for each of these berries. You could just kind of imagine where the direction of light is coming from, hitting your painting, and create the shadows accordingly. You could blend the edges on these little darker patches if you like, or just add them in with the hard edge. Because it's such a small area, when you step back and take a look, it's going to work well either way. Now I'm just going in with my clean damp brush. This is the smaller size one, and I am just blending a little bit of the edges of the green. So just have a clean brush and then rinse it periodically and make sure it's almost dry with your paper towel, and then you can go in with the tip and just agitate the areas where there's a harder edge of the darker green that you added, and it'll blend nicely into the lighter green stem. And now I'm just adding a little bit more detail and precision of a crisper line to the tiny little stems I created when I painted the leaves. And I just used the tip of my number 6 brush originally to create that thin line. If it works better for you to create the little leaflet stem, you could use the smaller brush and then paint the leaf with the larger brush. It's up to you. I just went in with the number 1 and created a little bit more of a crisp line and then added some darker color. Now we are almost finished the berries, and the last step is to add a little bit of brown to each berry, which really does bring it to life. This is my favorite part when I'm painting any type of berries. So I used Payne's Gray and burnt sienna to mix the brown, and I added a little bit of my Carbazole Violet or Winsor Violet, whichever brand you're using, and it creates a really nice brownish black color. And now I'm just adding with my small brush just a little sort of tick or a dash to each tip of the berry. And this is the final step for your fall berries, and it really does finish it off. I hope you enjoyed this project, and I would love to see what you create. Feel free to post a picture of your project in the discussion section of this class, or you can even email me a picture of what you've created.